The winds carried the scent of spices and salt, the whisper of merchants bargaining in 100 tongues. The Silk Road, a lifeline between empires, was where Jin Rui's story began, long before she ever knew the word survival. Her parents were traders from the Kingdom of Mali, a land of gold, knowledge, and power. They had traveled farther than most would ever dare, crossing the vast deserts, sailing across treacherous seas, and journeying through bustling markets where Africa, the Middle East, and Asia intertwined. Gold, ivory, rare gems, spices from deep within the continent, they carried the wealth of kings. But wealth was never enough to protect them. Seeking to establish a foothold in the East, Jin Rui's parents settled in a border town, a crucial trading hub where cultures mixed, where foreigners were either embraced or exploited. They were respected for the goods they provided, but never truly welcomed. And when war came, they were the first to bleed. It happened on a night when the moon hung low and red, as if warning of the blood to come. The rival kingdom's soldiers swept into the town like a tide of death, their banners stark against the night. No warning, no mercy. The attack was brutal. Buildings collapsed in fire, marketplaces turned into slaughterhouses, and cries of the dying drowned beneath the clash of steel. Jin Rui was only a child, too young to understand, but old enough to feel terror sink into her bones. Her mother's hands were the last warmth she knew. "Run, my love," she whispered, pressing a golden amulet into Jin Rui's palm. "Run and do not look back." But she looked back. She saw her father, his dagger slick with blood, standing in front of their home as the soldiers surrounded him. A warrior once, a merchant now, but no man could fight an army alone. She saw him cut down where he stood, saw her mother fall beside him. Their home, a place of laughter, of stories from distant lands, became nothing but cinders. And Jin Rui? She ran. She wandered alone, slipping through the wreckage like a shadow, surviving on scraps stolen from corpses and whatever food was left unburned in abandoned stalls. She was a foreign child in a dead town, a girl of dark skin and strange tongue, and the people who remained pretended not to see her. To them, she was already gone, just another casualty of war. Days passed. Hunger gnawed at her ribs. The weight of her parents' amulet dug into her palm, but she did not let it go. She could still hear her mother's voice. Run! She had run, but where could she go? The soldiers arrived after the war had already taken its toll. Among them rode a man in armor black as midnight, his gaze sharp as the blade at his side. A Chinese general, sent to reclaim what little remained of the border town. As he moved through the streets, stepping over bodies and ashes, he found her. A child, half-starved, covered in soot, clutching a golden amulet in trembling fingers. She did not beg. She did not cry. She just looked at him, her dark eyes burning with something he had seen only in seasoned warriors. Defiance, survival, a will that refused to be broken. For a long moment, the general simply watched her. Then, he dismounted. He knelt beside her, studying the amulet in her hands. "Your family?" he asked. Jin Rui said nothing, because her family was gone. The general exhaled, rising to his feet. He had no reason to take her. She was a foreign child with no blood ties, no allies, no future. And yet, "She will come with me," he said. His men hesitated. "She has no people," one soldier murmured. "She does now," the general said simply. And so, Jin Rui left the ruins of her past behind. She did not know it then, but that day, she was not just taken in. She was recruited. Jin Rui did not find a home with the general. She found discipline. She found purpose. The general did not raise her like a daughter. He forged her like a blade. She learned to read maps before she could read poetry. She learned how to hold a weapon before she learned how to write her name. She learned that in the world of men, power is not given, it is taken. She did not cry. She did not complain. She trained, because weakness had no place in war, and war was all she had left. Years passed. The general watched her grow, from a silent orphan into something more. She was quick, ruthless, and above all, clever. But strength alone was not enough. Not in an empire ruled by whispers as much as swords. So when the time came, he did not keep her hidden in the barracks. He took her to the capital, to the forbidden halls of the imperial court, to the emperor himself. And as she stepped into the grand palace, where war was waged with words and deception, Jin Rui knew. She was no longer just a lost child from the ashes. She was a contender for the throne. She would not just survive. She would rule. The first thing she remembered was the weight of their stares. Hundreds of eyes bore into her. A sea of silk-robed figures gathered along the golden streets of the imperial city. Some whispered behind jeweled sleeves, others sneered openly. A child of foreign blood, dark-skinned and strange, wrapped in fine silks that did not belong to her. She should not be here, and yet she was. She sat stiffly in the lacquered palanquin, its red and gold curtains swaying with each step of the servants carrying it. Outside, the imperial capital unfolded, a world of towering pagodas, shimmering lakes, and bridges laced with golden dragons. Drums pounded. The crowd parted as soldiers in iron armor marched ahead, clearing a path. At the very front, her adoptive father, General Liang, the empire's war hero, rode his black stallion in silent authority. His wife, Lady May, sat beside her in the palanquin, her slender fingers resting on her lap, composed as ever. "Keep your head high," Lady May murmured, eyes forward. "You are of our house now." A lie, or at least a half-truth. She had their name, their silks, their wealth, but the looks of contempt said otherwise. At the palace gates, guards stepped aside, allowing them entrance to the Hall of Supreme Harmony, where the emperor himself awaited. She took a slow breath as they stepped inside. The hall stretched impossibly high, filled with carved columns wrapped in dragons, walls painted with golden phoenixes. Ministers, nobles, and concubines lined the chamber, standing beneath candlelit chandeliers. The emperor sat atop his jade throne, robes embroidered with the golden clouds, eyes like cut steel. He was silent as General Liang bowed before him. "Your Majesty," the general said, his voice calm yet commanding, "I have returned from the southern campaign. The rebels have been quelled." "And the girl?" The emperor's gaze flicked to her. A ripple of whispers. A foreigner in the court? Unthinkable. Why bring such a creature before the Son of Heaven? She clenched her fists, her nails pressing against her palm. Every instinct screamed to run, but she would not. Not when she had already come this far. The emperor tilted his head, stepped forward. Lady May's hand brushed her arm, a silent reassurance. She lifted her chin and stepped into the center of the chamber, each step echoing like the strike of a war drum. "Your name?" the emperor asked. She hesitated. She had been called many things: orphan, foreigner, unwanted. But her mother had given her a name, long before she was taken away. She met the emperor's gaze. "Jin Rui," she said, voice steady. "My name is Jin Rui." Silence. Then a laugh, sharp and mocking. A nobleman, draped in blue robes, stepped forward. "A bold tongue for an orphan girl," he mused. "Tell me, child, do you think you belong here?" She felt the weight of their judgment pressing on her. She could say what they wanted to hear. She could lower her head, play the part of an obedient girl, or dash. She straightened her spine. I belong where I choose to stand. The hall froze. The noble's smirk faltered. The emperor's gaze flickered, curious now. And somewhere in the crowd, a boy around her age, a prince perhaps, watched her with quiet fascination. A long silence stretched in the chamber. Then, at last, the emperor leaned forward. We shall see. Jin Rui stood in the center of the hall of supreme harmony, the weight of 100 gazes pressing down on her like a mountain. She was alone. The emperor leaned forward on his jade throne, fingers tapping against the carved armrest. His expression was unreadable, but the amusement in his dark eyes sent a chill through her spine. You speak boldly for a girl with no place in this court, he mused, his voice calm yet razor-sharp. Jin Rui kept her chin high, though every muscle in her body screamed at her to lower her gaze. I only speak the truth, Your Majesty. A ripple of murmurs spread through the assembled nobles, concubines, and ministers. Some sneered, others whispered behind jeweled fans. She could feel their disdain like a blade at her throat. She is arrogant. A foreigner should know her place. Let the emperor deal with her. The emperor's lips curled into the faintest smirk. Then let us see if your truth has weight. He raised a hand. At his signal, a pair of guards stepped forward, dragging something heavy across the polished marble floor. The sound echoed in the vast hall, a deep, metallic scrape. A cage. Inside it, a beast stirred, a massive, golden-furred leopard, its eyes burning with hunger. Its ribs showed through its sleek coat, a sign that it had been starved. A noblewoman gasped, Your Majesty, surely not. The emperor raised a single finger, silencing her. His gaze never left Jin Rui. You claim to stand where you choose, he said, voice laced with dark amusement. Then stand against this. The cage door swung open. The leopard lunged. Jin Rui's body moved before she could think. She threw herself to the side, rolling across the marble just as the beast's claws slashed through the air where she had stood. The nobles gasped, some stepping back as the leopard skidded, its sharp claws scraping the floor. It turned its golden eyes on her, hunting her. She had no weapons, no armor, just the silk robes on her back and the fire in her veins. Her heart pounded, but she forced herself to stay calm. Think, this wasn't just a test of survival, it was a test of control. The leopard stalked forward, muscles tense to pounce. Instead of running, Jin Rui did something no one expected. She met its gaze. The hall fell deathly silent. The beast snarled, teeth bared, but it hesitated. Jin Rui held its eyes, refusing to look away. In the wild, in the animal world, breaking eye contact meant submission. A challenge of dominance was decided in silence. The emperor leaned forward, intrigued. The court held its breath. The leopard snarled again, but then stopped. It lowered its body slightly, its tail flicking, ears twitching. A test, a dare. Jin Rui took a slow, steady breath. Then, she did the unthinkable. She took a single step toward the beast. The court gasped. The leopard did not attack. It watched her, studied her, then, slowly, it lowered its head, in submission. The silence in the court was deafening. Jin Rui did not move, even as the leopard slowly slinked back, no longer seeing her as prey. The emperor chuckled, deep and amused. Fascinating! He stood descending the steps of his throne with measured grace. When he reached her, he looked down at her, this small, foreign girl who had tamed a beast with nothing but her eyes. Perhaps you are not as weak as they say. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the grand hall. Jin Rui did not lower her gaze. She did not bow. The emperor smiled. "Rise, Jin Rui. From this day forth, you will be raised in this court. Let us see if your strength lasts." A nobleman scoffed. "She is still nothing more than a foreign girl." The emperor glanced at the cowering noble. His voice was calm, yet held a deadly edge. "A foreign girl who stands while you kneel." The court fell silent, and in that moment, Jin Rui knew this was just the beginning. Jin Rui had barely settled into her new chambers when the summons arrived. A silk scroll, tied with a red ribbon. "You are invited to the Plum Blossom Pavilion for tea with the noble princes and princesses." It was not a request. Lady May, her adoptive mother, read the letter with an unreadable expression. "They do not invite you to be kind." Jin Rui knew that already. The court had accepted her on the emperor's command, but that did not mean they welcomed her. If anything, it made her a target. The other noble-born children had spent their entire lives within these golden walls, knowing who would inherit power, who would be favored. And now, a foreigner had disrupted that order. The Plum Blossom Pavilion was beautiful. A serene garden of delicate white petals, a koi-filled pond, and silk cushions set around a lacquered tea table. Jin Rui arrived to find them waiting. The young nobles of the imperial court, sons and daughters of dukes, princes, and high-ranking officials, all dressed in fine silk, their eyes sharp with hidden malice. At the center sat Prince Liang Wei, the emperor's third son and one of the most respected princes in court. Tall, composed, with the practiced elegance of a future ruler. His dark gaze studied her like one would an insect, one they were about to crush. "Lady Jin Rui," he said smoothly, voice laced with condescension, "how generous of you to join us." Jin Rui bowed, keeping her face unreadable. This was a test. "I am honored by the invitation, Your Highness." Liang Wei smiled, a slow, dangerous smile. "Then let us drink to our new companion." The first attack was subtle. They spoke of heritage, lineage, and the divine right of those born in the empire. "The blood of emperors flows through us," one noble girl said sweetly, pouring her tea. "It is in our bones, our destiny." "I wonder," a young duke's son mused, "what destiny awaits those who were not born of the right blood." Laughter. Jin Rui felt the heat of their stares. They wanted her to break, to show weakness. Instead, she picked up her teacup. She smiled. "I agree," she said, taking a slow sip. "It is a shame that some must rely on their bloodline alone, rather than their ability." Silence. Liang Wei's smirk disappeared. The first blow was hers, but she knew this was far from over. That night, as Jin Rui walked alone in the palace corridors, a whisper stopped her in her tracks. "You handled the prince well today." Jin Rui turned sharply. The hallway was empty, only the flickering lanterns casting long shadows. But she knew someone was there. "You should be more cautious," the voice continued, smooth and knowing. "Prince Liang Wei does not take insults lightly." Jin Rui's fingers curled. "Who are you?" Silence. Then, movement. A figure stepped from the darkness. A tall, robed man with eyes like a serpent and a faint, knowing smirk. "I have many names," he said, "but you may call me Master Shui." Jin Rui did not trust easily, but Master Shui was different. He had no noble's arrogance, no courtier's fake smiles. He watched her like he already knew what she would become. "You are strong, but not strong enough," he said. "You survived today, but tomorrow, Prince Liang Wei will not play with words. He will play with knives." Jin Rui swallowed but did not look away. "Why do you care?" Master Zhu smiled. "Because I enjoy watching the powerful fall. And you, little one, You will bring an empire to its knees one day." A chill ran down her spine. Then he extended his hand. "Shall we begin?" That night, her real training began. Master Zhu taught her the hidden language of the court, how to read a man's lies from the twitch of his fingers, how to smile while planning someone's ruin. He showed her how to wield words like blades, how to twist a conversation until the enemy did not even realize they had lost. And, most importantly, he taught her the first rule of survival in the palace. Do not be the strongest, be the most dangerous. 3 days after the tea gathering, a golden-edged letter arrived at Jin Rui's chambers. "Join us for a hunt in the imperial forest. The noble sons and daughters of the court will be there." Signed, Prince Liang Wei. Jin Rui knew it was a trap. She was not yet trained in the art of deception, but she understood one thing. When nobles smiled at you, it was often because they had already sharpened the knife for your back. Lady Mei, her adoptive mother, gripped the letter tightly, her knuckles white. "Do not go." Jin Rui met her gaze. "If I refuse, they will call me a coward. If I go, at least I can see the knife before they stab me." Lady Mei exhaled sharply but did not argue. She knew her daughter had already chosen her path. That evening, Jin Rui rode toward the imperial forest, knowing that only one of them would walk away from this unscathed. The noble youths gathered at dawn, their horses restless beneath them. Bows, spears, and swords gleamed in the early morning light. Prince Liang Wei sat atop his black stallion, his eyes filled with quiet amusement. "You came," he said. Jin Rui smiled coldly. "Was I not invited?" He chuckled, flicking his reins. "Let us see if your courage extends beyond tea and words." The hunters rode into the dense bamboo forest. But as the game began, Jin Rui realized too late what the true hunt was. She was not the hunter. She was the prey. The first arrow whistled past her ear. She turned sharply, just in time to see 3 noble sons smirking as they aimed their bows at her. This wasn't a game. It was an execution. Jin Rui kicked her horse into a gallop, weaving between the trees as arrows rained down. If she fell, they would claim it was an accident, a mere hunting mishap. But she would not fall. Just as one of the nobles lifted his bow for a killing shot, an arrow sliced through the air, piercing his hand. He screamed. From the treetops, a figure landed silently beside Jin Rui, Prince Zhao Luan, the second son of the emperor. Unlike his brother Liang Wei, Zhao Luan had always been an enigma, watching from the shadows, rarely engaging in court politics. Now his gaze burned into hers. "Ride, now." Jin Rui did not hesitate. She turned her horse, racing deeper into the forest with Zhao Luan at her side. Behind them, Prince Liang Wei's voice rang out, sharp with anger. "Zhao Luan, stay out of this." But the second prince did not stop. And Jin Rui would never forget that in her moment of near death, it was Zhao Luan who had saved her. That night, the air in Master Zhu's chamber was thick with tension. Jin Rui stood in the center, her silk robes torn, dried blood stiffening the fabric. The weight of the night's battle still clung to her skin, the ghost of a hunt that had nearly ended her life. She had survived, but barely. Master Xue regarded her with cold amusement. "Tell me, little one." His voice was soft, yet sharp. "What lesson did you learn today?" Jin Rui's fingers curled into fists. "Never trust an enemy." Master Zhu let out a low, quiet laugh. "A good answer," he mused, "but the wrong one." He lifted a hand. 2 masked figures stepped forward, dragging someone behind them. Jin Rui's breath hitched. A man collapsed onto the cold stone floor, his wrists bound, his silk robe stained with dirt and blood. It was one of the noble sons who had hunted her. His face was swollen from a beating. his once proud features now marred with fear. Jin Rui stiffened. Master Shu's voice never rose, yet it sliced through the room like a blade. The true lesson is this: when your enemy fails to kill you, do not give them a second chance. He placed a dagger in Jin Rui's hand. Kill him! The weight of the dagger felt heavier than any sword she had ever wielded. The noble shook, his breath ragged. Please, please, I only followed orders, he whimpered, his voice cracking with desperation. Jin Rui's grip tightened around the hilt. She knew this was a test, a trap. Master Shui was watching, waiting. If she killed him, she would cross a line she could never return from. If she let him go, would she be sealing her own fate? But there was a third path, one that did not demand mercy, one that did not demand blood. Jin Rui inhaled slowly. Then she knelt, not to show weakness, but to look the noble in the eye. His breath hitched, his pupils blown wide with terror. She leaned in, her lips barely moving as she whispered, "If you ever cross me again, I will not kill you." A pause, then she smiled. "I will destroy you." The noble flinched. His body shook, not from the cold stone beneath him, but from something else, something worse than death. Because Jin Rui was not promising him a swift end. She was promising him ruin. Master Shui watched her carefully, a slow, amused smile curling at the edge of his lips. She had not done what he asked, but she had done something better. She had made an enemy fear her more than death. Jin Rui rose to her feet and tossed the dagger back to Master Shui. "I do not waste my blade on cowards," she said. Then, without looking back, she turned and left the chamber. The noble was dragged away. His fate was no longer her concern. But when news reached her the next day, she was not surprised. Prince Liang Wei had left the capital. For now, she had not won, not yet. But for the first time, he was the one running. And that, Jin Rui knew, was a victory of its own. By sunrise, the rumors had already spread like wildfire. Jin Rui's name was on everyone's lips, but not for the reasons she wanted. The second prince defied his brother for her? Why would he protect an outsider? Perhaps the foreign girl has bewitched him. The whispers followed her through the palace corridors, weaving into every silk-curtained chamber, every polished marble hallway. And when she entered the Lotus Pavilion, where the noble ladies gathered for morning tea, all conversation stopped. The imperial princess Zhao Ying, the emperor's only daughter, set down her teacup with deliberate grace, her dark eyes cold as she looked Jin Rui over. "So," the princess mused, "how does a girl with no bloodline make a prince kneel?" Jin Rui did not flinch. "I did not ask for his help." The princess's smile was thin, sharp, number, but he gave it anyway. That is far more interesting. As Jin Rui left the pavilion, she felt a presence behind her. She turned. Prince Zhao Luan stood in the courtyard, dressed in deep navy silk, watching her beneath the shade of a cherry blossom tree. Her breath caught, just for a moment. "You should not have interfered," she said, keeping her voice cool. Zhao Luan tilted his head, the corner of his lips twitching. "And yet, you live." His eyes burned with something unreadable, something that sent a shiver down her spine. He stepped closer, voice low. "You intrigue me, Jin Rui." Her heartbeat quickened. She had spent her life avoiding admiration, affection, weakness. But Zhao Luan's gaze held none of the emptiness of courtly flattery. It was something deeper, something dangerous. Before she could respond, he leaned in slightly, murmuring, "You should be careful. Many will not like what they saw." Then he was gone, and Jin Rui was left wondering if she had just gained an ally. or an even greater distraction. Deep within the palace, in a chamber of silk screens and burning incense, a figure sat listening. A noblewoman knelt before them, whispering everything. The second prince defended her. The court is unsettled. The figure sat forward. Their face remained in shadow, but their fingers tapped against the lacquered table. Jin Rui, they murmured. The name rolled off their tongue like a quiet promise of ruin. She is rising too quickly. The noblewoman hesitated. Should we act? A pause. Then, a soft, amused chuckle. Not yet. Let her think she is safe. Fingers trace the rim of a jade cup. Then, when the time is right, we will crush her completely. Jin Rui was still recovering from the whispers of the court when the summons came. A royal guard stood in her doorway. Lady Jin Rui, he announced, voice firm. His Majesty commands your presence. The air left her lungs. The Emperor. She barely had time to straighten her robes before she was escorted through the grand halls of the Golden Dragon Palace, past towering columns and murals of past rulers. When she reached the grand hall, the Emperor sat atop his jade throne, his gaze sharp as a dagger. Silence filled the chamber. Then he spoke. The Imperial hunt, he said, his voice smooth but unreadable. I hear it was eventful. Jin Rui lowered her gaze and practiced deference. It was an honor to be invited, Your Majesty. A long pause, then a dangerous smile. An honor? His voice carried a quiet amusement. From what I hear, you were nearly slaughtered. Jin Rui's fingers curled into her silk sleeves. It was unexpected. The Emperor tilted his head. Was it? Her breath caught. Did he know? Did he suspect that Prince Liang Wei had orchestrated it? That she had nearly died? That his own son had defied his brother to protect her? The Emperor slowly stood, descending from his throne in measured steps. He stopped directly before her. Tell me, Jin Rui, he murmured, why should I let you stay in my court? Her pulse thundered. This was it. She had only moments to answer, moments to convince the most powerful man in the empire that she was worth keeping alive. The air in the grand hall was thick with tension. The Emperor stood before her, his golden robes gleaming under the candlelight, his sharp eyes studying her like a puzzle he had yet to solve. Tell me, Jin Rui, he repeated, voice calm but dangerous. Why should I let you stay in my court? Every nerve in her body screamed at her to be careful. One wrong word, and she would be cast out, or worse, executed. But she was not afraid. She lifted her chin. Because I am more useful alive than dead. A murmur rippled through the court. Bold, reckless, dangerous. The Emperor's brows lifted slightly. Is that so? Jin Rui lowered her voice, ensuring only he could hear. There are those who already wish to see me gone. If I can be a threat to them, imagine what I can be for you. The Emperor studied her for a long moment, then he laughed. Low, quiet at first, then rich with amusement. The tension in the room shattered. He leaned closer, voice a whisper of steel. Then prove it. Jin Rui's heart thundered. She had passed, but the test was far from over. That night, as Jin Rui returned to her chambers, she found a scroll hidden beneath her pillow. No seal, no signature, but the handwriting was elegant, unmistakable. Prince Zhao Luan. Her hands trembled slightly as she unrolled it. Be careful. Liang Wei is not done with you. Do not trust anyone. Meet me at the Moon Gate Garden at midnight. Jin Rui's pulse quickened. A warning. A secret meeting. A prince who had risked everything to save her. Her fingers traced the inked words. What did Zhao Luan truly want? And why did she feel her own walls beginning to crack? Far from Jin Rui's chambers, in the orchid pavilion, a woman sat surrounded by silk and shadows. Her hair was adorned with jade pins, her lips painted the color of blood. She was concubine Mei Lin, one of the emperor's most favored, but a woman who held far more power than most realized. A noblewoman knelt before her, whispering the latest rumors. The foreign girl had caught the emperor's attention, and the second prince's as well. Mei Lin's fingers tightened around her porcelain teacup. Interesting, she murmured. Then, slowly, she smiled. A cold, knowing smile. Let her rise a little higher, she said softly. The fall will be much sweeter. The palace was silent at midnight. Jin Rui slipped out of her chambers, heading toward the Moongate Garden. She had to meet Zhao Luan, but as she crossed through the lantern-lit corridors, she felt it. A shift in the air. A presence. Then, a whisper of steel. She barely moved in time. A dagger sliced through the air, aimed for her throat. She twisted, falling hard against the stone floor. A man in dark robes loomed over her, blade gleaming in the moonlight. A hired assassin. No, not just an assassin. One of Prince Liang Wei's men. Jin Rui rolled away just as the dagger plunged down, only for the blade to bury itself in her silk sleeve. Her attacker cursed, yanking the knife free. Jin Rui's mind raced. She had no weapon, no way to fight back. If she screamed, the palace guards might come, but not before the assassin silenced her first. Think. Then, she did the only thing she could. She lunged forward, twisting her body, using her own weight to throw the assassin off balance. The man stumbled, but he was faster, stronger. He recovered instantly, grabbing her by the throat, slamming her back against the stone wall. Jin Rui gasped, choking. This was it. This was how she would die. Then, an arrow struck the assassin in the chest. The man stiffened, his grip loosening. A second arrow pierced his throat. Blood sprayed across the marble. He collapsed. Jin Rui fell to her knees, gasping for breath, just as Prince Zhao Luan stepped out of the shadows, bow still in hand. For a moment they only stared at each other. Then Zhao Luan dropped his bow and rushed to her side. His hands, warm and steady, cupped her face, tilting her chin up to look at him. His voice was low, strained. Are you hurt? Jin Rui's breath caught. Too close. Too much. She forced herself to nod. I'm fine. Zhao Luan exhaled sharply. Then, without thinking, he pulled her into his arms. Jin Rui froze. His grip was tight, desperate, as if he had almost lost something he didn't realize he cared about. Her heart pounded violently against her ribs. Zhao Luan's lips brushed against her ear, his whisper barely audible. I told you not to trust anyone. Jin Rui swallowed but did not pull away. For the first time in years, she felt something dangerously close to comfort. But comfort was weakness, and weakness had no place in the imperial court. That night, as Jin Rui lay awake in her chambers, another letter arrived, slipped beneath her door. She hesitated before unfolding it. The words were written in perfect, elegant calligraphy. You have made enemies, but you do not have to fight alone. Come to the White Lotus Pavilion at dawn. We have much to discuss. No name, no seal. But one thing was clear. Someone in the court wanted to make a deal, and deals in the palace always came with a price. Jin Rui arrived at the White Lotus Pavilion before sunrise, the sky still painted in shades of violet and gold. The pavilion sat at the edge of a tranquil lake, its white tiled roof reflecting in the water like a perfect illusion. It was secluded, private, a place where whispers held more weight than swords. She had come alone. Whoever had sent the message had power, and power in the palace never came without danger. She stepped onto the pavilion's marble floor, her silk robes whispering against the stone. Then she saw him, seated at a carved wooden table, dressed in deep blue robes, Duke Ren Jianguo, one of the wealthiest and most powerful nobles in the empire. A man known for his wealth, his cunning, and his ability to shape the fates of emperors. His sharp eyes flicked to hers, and he gestured to the seat across from him. "Come, Lady Jin Rui, let us speak of the future." Jin Rui sat, her expression unreadable. Duke Ren poured 2 cups of jasmine tea, the steam curling in the cool morning air. "I have been watching you," he said, voice smooth, practiced. "You have potential, but potential means nothing without guidance." Jin Rui's fingers tightened around the porcelain cup. "And you offer guidance?" Duke Ren chuckled. "No, my dear. I offer something far more valuable." He leaned forward, his voice dropping into a whisper. "I offer you survival." The words hung in the air like a blade. Jin Rui met his gaze, searching for deception. "And what do you ask in return?" The Duke's smile was slow, knowing. "Your loyalty." Jin Rui's mind raced. Duke Ren was no ordinary noble. He controlled half the merchant routes in the empire, had alliances with the most powerful military governors, and whispered in the ears of kings. If he wanted her under his influence, it meant one thing. She was valuable to him. But why? She narrowed her eyes. "And if I refuse?" Duke Ren set his cup down gently. "Then you will be alone." His voice was calm, almost kind, but the threat beneath it was undeniable. Jin Rui's pulse quickened. If she accepted, she would gain a powerful patron, but at the cost of her freedom. If she refused, she would make a dangerous enemy. She had to choose. Far beyond the White Lotus Pavilion, hidden behind silk screens, a man sat listening. Dressed in dark, unadorned robes, Minister Jiang Wei, the emperor's most trusted strategist, watched the meeting unfold through a carefully crafted gap in the pavilion's walls. He was silent, calculating. Duke Ren was moving too soon, and Jin Rui, was she truly ready for the game she was stepping into? Jiang Wei's fingers tapped against the table in thought. He would not interfere, not yet. But if Jin Rui made the wrong choice today, he would ensure she never made another.